Well, can we start by, covering up my hairy stepmother wart? Because it must be showing.
Since the earliest fairy tales, few characters have struck fear in the hearts of children like the wicked stepmother.
Hate to break it to you, Angel, but you are no longer the only girl in Nick Parker's life.
She's taken on many forms, but wherever you find her, the wicked stepmother can usually be identified by these traits. She's self-interested, lacking or outright rejecting the caring, maternal instinct we normally associate with mothers.
Daddy's getting married. To Cruella de Vil. She's awful, Mom. We can't let him go through with it.
She's manipulative. She's portrayed as having schemed her way into marrying some hapless man who has no agency of his own, often a widower who struggles to look after his children all alone.
You're getting older, and there's just so much a father can do without help.
She also has an ulterior motive for marrying him, and it's usually about money.
Then I realized there's about 1 million reasons why that girl's giggling. And all of them are sitting at the Napa Valley Community Bank.
She's vindictive. Often, she has a beautiful young stepdaughter of whom she's insanely jealous. When she also has her own biological children, she's usually seen pitting them against her stepkids.
And bitterly jealous of Cinderella's charm and beauty, she was grimly determined to forward the interests of her own 2 awkward daughters.
Most importantly, she's unloving. Her affections toward her husband and her stepkids are assumed to be false, a cover for her nefarious plans to break the family apart.
The day we get married is the day I ship those brats off to Switzerland. Get the picture?
Or something even worse.
You will kill her.
But Your Majesty, the little princess.
Here's our take on the wicked stepmother and where she comes from, the psychological roots of our mistrust towards stepparents, and whether she'll ever be allowed to be part of the family.
And just think, soon you'll have a new mother.
You mean stepmother?
If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified about all our new videos. This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. It's like your own personal film festival streaming anytime, anywhere. As with so many of our most enduring storytelling tropes, the stepmother's bad reputation dates back to ancient Greece. The goddess Hera openly despised the children that her husband Zeus sired with other women, and she sought vengeance against them, even sending serpents to kill the infant Hercules in his crib. This idea of the stepmother as vindictive and wicked was further cemented in fairy tales by the Brothers Grimm.
A breath will still, a blood congeal, then I'll be fairest in the land.
As the Brothers Grimm updated stories from centuries-old German folklore, they also changed them to reinforce the sexist worldview of their times. Female characters who were depicted as powerful or dominant were also made to be evil. In the original tales of Hansel and Gretel and Snow White, this evil was perpetuated by biological mothers, which proved a challenge to the kind of patriarchal family values the Grimms were trying to uphold.
Stinking Grimm brothers.
As German literature expert Jack Zipes has theorized, the Brothers Grimm changed these characters to wicked stepmothers not only because they held motherhood sacred, but because the stepmother was already a figure of mistrust.
No matter how bad things get, they can always get worse.
Dying during childbirth was common in the 18th and 19th centuries, which left numerous fathers to remarry younger women. With the wicked stepmother, Zipes says the Brothers Grimm were reflecting sociologically a condition that existed during their lifetime: jealousy between a young stepmother and stepdaughter.
Yes, stepmother. Oh, you needn't call me that. Madam will do.
While age isn't always a factor in the wicked stepmother story, jealousy typically is. In the traditional tale of Cinderella, the stepmother treats her stepdaughter cruelly because Cinderella reminds her of all her own shortcomings.
No one deserves to be treated as you have treated me. Why do you do it?
Because you are young and innocent and good.
In some versions, the stepmother is suggested to be deeply envious of her husband's love for his daughter, which she suspects is far greater than his love for her. In others, she is simply cold and embittered and seems to take a sadistic pleasure in turning Cinderella into her prisoner.
You can't do this, you just can't. Let me out! You
Throughout them all, there's a resentment the stepmother has towards Cinderella that stems from the stepmother's own feelings of emptiness and discontent. The wicked stepmother at her core is portrayed as a threat to the nuclear family. After all, in order to have a stepmother, something has to have happened to the mother.
Pity you never knew your mother.
This is what makes the stepmother such a perfect villain. She's frightening to children because she implies the absence of their mom as well as the end of their parents' marriage.
A 12-year-old girl is trying to cope with the fact that her father is never moving back in here with his family.
She's a symbol of their loss and pain, which creates a natural dichotomy in the child's mind. The biological mother becomes a saintly victim, while the stepmother is instantly cast as the monster who took her place.
Your father is dead and buried beneath the snow in the same grave as your dear mother.
As the psychologist Bruno Bettelheim argues, this duality has a therapeutic function for the child. It is not only a means of preserving an internal all-good mother when the real mother is not all good, he writes. It also permits anger at this bad stepmother without endangering the goodwill of the true mother, who is viewed as a different person.
You did not say your daughter was so beautiful.
Well, she takes after
her mother. Just so.
Motherhood has long been equated with goodness.
You're Mother Earth incarnate.
And there are biological reasons why we see it that way. When a woman gives birth, her brain actually alters so that she can best care for her baby. She literally reorients herself around her child, to whom she becomes instinctively attached.
Oh, darling. I've loved you your whole life.
In the stereotypical depiction of stepmothers, maternity doesn't come naturally to them. They're painted as detached and false, sometimes even metaphorically opposed to nature itself.
Oh, I hate this place! This may be somebody's idea of fun, but it's not mine! I hate the fish, I hate the lake, I hate the trees!
And in stories where the biological mother is still alive, her irreplicable physical connection to her children is often emphasized and held against the stepmother.
You know, Ben was born in 2 hours, went straight to the breast, and camped there for the next 4 days.
The purity of the biological mother is also often contrasted against the stepmother's sexuality.
I know I am not your mother.
Please don't.
But I do have sex with your father.
God, Una, ew. I do not need a sex talk from my stepmother.
While the sexual relationship between biological parents is implicitly accepted as natural or wholesome, it is viewed as more illicit or even wrong when it's between the father and a stepmother.
It's weird to think of a woman being sexually attracted to dad.
There's an inequality to this as well. The younger, sexier stepmother has a body that's unchanged by the physical toll of motherhood, and this is portrayed as an unfair advantage.
Being young and beautiful is not a crime, you know.
But the distaste for the sexualized stepmothers is also less about her and more about the children's distress at seeing their father recontextualized as a man instead of a dad.
I mean, I don't need to tell you, but your father is a deeply sexual man.
No, you don't. Just did.
In her most frightening depictions, the mere perceived threat of the wicked stepmother is compounded by her other, more transparent transgressions. She's often seen not just as an interloper, but someone who asserts her tenuous power through acts of psychological torment and physical violence.
Well, you give your sister her half of this!
This is even more pronounced in stories about foster or adoptive mothers.
You love to make me hit you!
Why did you adopt me?
Most of these characters, too, are rooted in the ancient fairy tale idea of the good biological mother and the wicked stepmother. In truth, adoption is a selfless and loving act, as seen in stories like The Queen's Gambit, in which the adoptive mother is allowed to form a maternal bond that's simply based in love, not biology.
I'm so proud of you.
Stepfathers haven't always had an easy go of it either. As Salon's Graham Shelby notes, the kind and caring stepdad personified by the Brady Bunch's Mike Brady is an anomaly.
And I'm ready to be punished. I ruined your work.
Well, that part was an accident, sweetheart.
As Shelby writes, stepfathers' typical screen depictions range from moron to molester to maniac. They are creeps who have no compunction about being sexually attracted to their own stepchildren, like Lolita's Humbert Humbert.
When my darling mother finds out, she's going to divorce you and strangle me.
Or they're rage-filled monsters who dole out physical and emotional abuse to both their kids and their partners.
You don't like me much, do you, Mason? You think that's funny?
In many cases, the stepfather is positioned as someone who rescued the mother and her children from poverty or loneliness, and this gives him power over them, something that turns him into a tyrant.
Now, is it empty? Ah! Now, Mr. Big Time Hotshot Prep School. Is it empty?
In many of these portrayals, the stepfather represents an immediate physical threat to the family, one that must be overcome in order to restore their safety.
The boy is the problem. You haven't been hard enough on him. You've got to make a boy understand.
This idea has even inspired its very own horror franchise, The Stepfather, which depicts the stepfather figure as someone who's not only untrustworthy, but potentially dangerous.
Oh, that guy in Bellevue that killed his whole family. Cut him up with knives.
Maybe they disappointed him.
In these films, the evil stepfather preys upon the mother's need for companionship and support, manipulating her into marriage by pretending to be someone he's not, and turning her against her own children.
He's just some crazy creep. How can you even bear to let him touch you? Stop it! He's your father now and you'll respect him.
Power is what distinguishes how the evil stepfather and the wicked stepmother are portrayed. While the stepfather has it and abuses it, the stepmother usually craves it, and she goes to manipulative lengths to secure and protect it.
But after tomorrow, I'm the woman of the house, and you're off to a year-round boarding school, possibly in Tibet.
In more modern stories, her thirst for power is about money. The wicked stepmother is stereotyped as someone who is only there out of greed.
He's everything you ever wanted for your little girl, plus millions more.
When the children stand in the way of that, she fights back. Occasionally, she'll even give the father an ultimatum that reveals her desperation.
It's me or them. Take your pick.
Them.
And being reminded that he will always love his children more is usually a bitter pill for her to swallow.
I love you. I love you.
Why do we assume that stepmothers and stepfathers are less loving, less honorable, and potentially more menacing members of our families? All of these negative portrayals somewhat correlate with a phenomenon known as the Cinderella effect, which describes an observed higher incidence of children who are mistreated by step-parents as compared to genetic parents.
Well, if my father were alive.
Well, he's not, is he?
Evolutionary psychologists have theorized that this tendency can be partly explained by attachment theory. Step-parents simply don't have the natural parental bond formed during the early years of childhood, which leads them to neglect and even hurt their stepkids. While the Cinderella effect has attracted controversy, studies have found that step-parents show higher rates of negative behaviors toward their stepchildren. Stepfathers in particular have been found to be much more antagonistic and abusive, even if the majority of stepdads aren't. Yet in our fictional representations, stepfathers still have a much easier time of it than stepmothers. Those more extreme examples aside, the stepdad is usually portrayed as someone who's annoying yet innocuous. He's often the irritatingly better man standing between the estranged biological father whenever he tries connecting with his kids and ex-wife.
She's my daughter.
You don't know the first thing about being a father.
But he's usually not the villain. Compared to the stepmom, the stepfather is afforded a disproportionate gratitude. On screen and in our society, he's given a grudging yet earnest respect for stepping up and voluntarily raising kids who are not his own.
Brad here is more of a real dad than any of us. You ever want to see how you should be raising your kids, go look at this guy.
This gendered power imbalance is why the wicked stepmother trope remains evergreen. We're more likely to treat men who choose to become stepfathers as noble and generous, while we suspect stepmothers of being deceitful and selfish. Studies even confirm that children are less likely to love their stepmothers than their stepfathers.
To be fair, she's not an evil stepmother. She's just a
Overcoming the stigma of the wicked stepmother means more than just letting go of fairy tales. It requires re-examining our centuries-old attitudes about parenting, families, and women. We live in a very different world from the one the Brothers Grimm saw. These days, divorce is common and blended families are everywhere.
By the time I was your age, I'd been through 3 stepmothers.
According to the Pew Research Center in 2010, some 42% of American adults had a stepfamily member. And the same year, the US Census estimated that new stepfamilies form at an average rate of 1,300 a day. The stepmother is no longer a symbol of loss or tragedy that's befallen the nuclear family. She's part of our everyday reality, where our ideas about the so-called traditional family have become increasingly outdated. And in our more nuanced depictions of stepfamilies, we can see these assumptions being interrogated, and the stepmother finally allowed a redemption. The 1998 film Stepmom offers one of the rare sympathetic portraits of stepmotherhood in Julia Roberts' Isabel, who tries everything to get her new partner's children to like her.
Why don't we name the puppy? Puppy needs a name.
I know, Isabel. Well, it kind of smells like you, and I'm allergic to you too. Fits perfectly.
At least initially, Isabel shows all the archetypal traits of the on-screen stepmother. She's young and lacks maternal instinct, she's occasionally irresponsible, and she prioritizes her career over family.
It's not that I can't cook, it's that I choose not to cook.
Meanwhile, her stepchildren's biological mother, Jackie, played by Susan Sarandon, is depicted as the gold standard of motherhood, everything Isabel can never be.
I'll handle it from here, Isabel.
Sure you will, Jackie.
But eventually, both Jackie and the film find empathy for Isabel, recognizing the fact that she's trying, and acknowledging that while Isabel may not be the children's biological mother, she will still play an important role in raising them.
And she will be a better person because of me. And because of you.
The false fairy tale dichotomy of the good mother and the wicked stepmother ignores the more nuanced influence that a stepparent can have on their stepchildren, and how sometimes the lack of a parental bond makes room for one based in friendship.
Did you see the look on Brad's face? Thank you so much.
The titular character of Juno starts off in a typically antagonistic relationship with her stepmother Bren, and she resents the very idea of Bren getting involved with her life.
You don't know anything about me.
I know enough.
Yet Juno gradually realizes that she doesn't really know anything about Bren either. As she supports Juno through her pregnancy, Bren not only proves herself to be protective of Juno, like a mother should be, she's also a pretty good friend. She's exactly the kind of blunt, fearless smart mouth that Juno admires.
What is your job title exactly?
I'm an ultrasound technician, ma'am.
Well, I'm a nail technician, and I think we both ought to stick to what we know.
This kind of relationship is complex, and it takes time to nurture. Unlike with biological parents, whom kids know from the moment they're born, you have to make the effort to get to know a step-parent. According to author James Bray, most stepfamilies don't feel like a unit until several years after they're formed. Developing that closeness requires the kind of commitment, open communication, and compassion that stories about the wicked stepmother simply don't show, or even acknowledge as possible. That's because those stories are about fear. The child's fear of the stepmother may be an understandable response, with both biological and psychological explanations.
My mom and your dad are getting me. Don't say it. Don't.
Yet, as with most fears, it's also rooted in misunderstanding, something that can be overcome. It's always going to be difficult for kids to accept a new mother figure into their lives.
You don't expect to wake up one morning with a new mom who looks like she fell off a mud flap.
The stepmother starts at an unfair disadvantage due to our unfortunate patriarchal attitudes toward women's power and pitting women against one another.
Mommy?
What, sweetie?
If you want me to hate her, I will.
But this doesn't have to be the case. Today, blended families have become not only more common, but normalized. Just look at Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, who has spoken about her close relationship not only with her 2 stepkids, but also with their mom, saying, "We sometimes joke that our modern family is almost a little too functional." As Harris's example shows, the arrival of a step-parent doesn't have to mark the death of a family, but a new beginning, one that can have its own happy ending.
And I've had a lot of titles over my career, and certainly Vice President will be great, but Mamala will always be the one that means the most.
The idea that stepmothers are inherently wicked is just a fairy tale, and it's one we don't have to believe in.
She can have us both. Love us both.
Hi everyone, I'm Susanna.
I'm Deborah, and we're the creators of The Take.
Please subscribe and tell us what you want our take on next.
This video is brought to you by Mubi, a streaming service we love. Every day, Mubi premieres a new film. Whether it's a movie you've been dying to see or one you've never heard of before, there is always something new to discover. So in this world where it's very easy to spend hours debating what you should watch, Mubi is like having a really cool friend with amazing taste in movies, making it so much easier for you. They feature hard-to-come-by masterpieces, indie festival darlings, influential art house and foreign films, lesser-known films by your favorite famous directors, and more. Plus, you can even download the films to watch offline, and there are no ads ever. This month, Mubi will present the exclusive streaming premiere of Give Me Liberty. This comedy about a medical transport driver debuted at Sundance and Cannes and later took home the John Cassavetes Award at the Independent Spirit Awards, making it one of the most celebrated films from last year's festival circuit. We can't recommend Mubi highly enough. You can try it out now for free for a whole month. Just click the link in the description below.